Marcus had been living in the same apartment building for 3 years. He loved everything about his small corner of the city, the coffee shop downstairs, the park across the street, and most importantly, his private parking garage. It wasn't much to look at from the outside, just a simple metal door with peeling paint, but inside was his sanctuary. This wasn't just any parking spot. Marcus had paid extra money every month for this private garage space. While other residents fought over street parking or squeezed into the building's cramped parking lot, Marcus had his own little haven where he could park his car safely. The garage had become more than just a place to store his vehicle. Marcus had set up a small workbench in the corner where he tinkered with electronics and fixed household items. He kept his bicycle mounted on the wall, along with seasonal decorations and boxes of memories from college. The concrete floor was spotless, and he had even installed better lighting to make the space more welcoming. This garage represented something important to him. It was proof that his hard work was paying off, that he could afford nice things, and that he had found his place in the world. Every morning, Marcus would pull out of his garage with a sense of pride. He would carefully lock the heavy metal door and head to his job at the local engineering firm. Every evening, he would return home, press the garage door opener he had installed, and pull into his personal space. It was a routine that brought him comfort and satisfaction. His neighbors often commented on how lucky he was to have such a convenient setup, especially during the harsh winter months when everyone else had to scrape ice off their windshields. But Marcus had no idea that his peaceful parking arrangement was about to be disrupted in the most unexpected way. He had grown comfortable in his routine, never imagining that someone would challenge his right to use the space he was paying for. The building management had clear records of his lease agreement, and his name was painted on a small sign next to the garage door. Everything seemed perfectly secure and official. The trouble began on a rainy Tuesday morning in October. Marcus was running slightly late for an important meeting at work. He grabbed his coffee, collected his briefcase, and hurried down to his garage. But when he turned the corner toward his parking space, he stopped in his tracks. There, parked, directly in front of his garage door, was a bright red sedan that he had never seen before. The car was positioned in such a way that Marcus couldn't even begin to open his garage door, let alone get his own vehicle out. Marcus stood there for a moment staring at the red car in disbelief. He checked his watch and realized he was going to be late if he didn't figure this out quickly. He looked around the parking area, hoping to see someone who might own the mysterious vehicle. The morning was quiet, with most residents already gone for the day. He walked around the red car looking for any clues about who might own it. There were no personal items visible inside, no parking permits or identifying stickers. Growing more frustrated by the minute, Marcus decided to knock on doors in the building to find the car's owner. He started with the apartments closest to the parking area, hoping someone would recognize the vehicle. The first few doors he tried either had no answer or residents who claimed they had never seen the red car before. One elderly neighbor suggested that maybe someone was visiting and had made an honest mistake about where they could park. After 20 minutes of searching, Marcus realized he was going to be very late for his meeting. He had no choice but to call his boss and explain the situation. He also called the building management office, but they told him it would take at least an hour for someone to come investigate the parking violation. Marcus felt his frustration growing as he stood there, trapped by someone else's thoughtless parking decision. Finally, Marcus decided to leave a polite note on the red car's windshield. He wrote, "Hi there. You're parked in front of my private garage and I can't get my car out. Could you please move when you get this message? Thanks so much." He left his phone number and hoped for a quick response. Then he called a rideshare service and headed to work, already planning what he would say to his boss about missing the morning meeting. Throughout his workday, Marcus kept checking his phone for a call or text from the mysterious car owner, but his phone remained silent. By lunchtime, he was genuinely worried. What if this person planned to leave their car there all day? What if they were visiting someone for an extended period? Marcus realized he might need to take more serious action if the car was still there when he got home from work that evening. When Marcus returned home that evening, his heart sank. The red sedan was still there, parked exactly where it had been that morning. Now he was truly stuck. Not only had someone blocked his garage all day, but they had completely ignored his polite note. Marcus walked closer to inspect the car and discovered something that made his blood boil. His carefully written note had been crumpled up and tossed on the ground next to the vehicle. This wasn't an accident or misunderstanding anymore. Someone had deliberately chosen to ignore his request and disrespect his property. Marcus picked up the crumpled note and smoothed it out, staring at his own polite words. He had been so careful to be friendly and understanding, assuming that any reasonable person would move their car once they realized the problem. But this person had not only ignored him, they had literally thrown his note away like garbage. The disrespect felt personal now, and Marcus could feel his anger building. He decided to try a different approach. Marcus spent the next hour going door to door throughout the entire apartment building, this time with more determination. He knocked on every single door, described the red car in detail, and asked if anyone knew who owned it. Most residents were sympathetic and helpful, but nobody recognized the vehicle. A few people mentioned seeing a woman with dark hair around the building recently, but no one could provide any definitive information about who she was or where she lived. One neighbor, Mrs. Chen from the second floor, mentioned that she had seen someone parking that red car in different spots around the building over the past week. I thought it was strange, she said, because she seemed to be testing different parking spaces like she was looking for the best spot. This information made Marcus even more suspicious. It sounded like someone was deliberately scouting the area and had chosen his garage entrance as their preferred parking location. Marcus called the building management company again, this time with more urgency in his voice. The manager, Mr. Rodriguez, apologized for the delay and promised to send someone first thing the next morning. Unfortunately, he explained, we can't have the car towed without following proper procedures. We need to document the violation, attempt to contact the owner through official channels, and wait 24 hours before calling a tow truck. Marcus appreciated that the building had proper procedures, but he was frustrated by how long the process would take. That night, Marcus hardly slept. He kept thinking about his car trapped in the garage and wondering what kind of person would be so inconsiderate. He had always prided himself on being a good neighbor, keeping his music low, cleaning up after himself, and respecting other people's property. He couldn't understand why someone would show such blatant disregard for his rights and his politely written request. The next morning brought another surprise. When Marcus went down to check on the situation, he found that the red car had moved, but only slightly. Instead of leaving entirely, the car was now parked in a legal spot in the building's parking lot. But there was something new and infuriating attached to Marcus's garage door. Someone had taped a handwritten note directly to his property. The note was written in purple ink with messy handwriting. This parking situation is ridiculous. There's nowhere else to park around here. Find another solution. Marcus read the note 3 times, hardly believing what he was seeing. Not only had this person refused to apologize for blocking his garage, they were now demanding that he find an alternative parking arrangement. The audacity of the message left him speechless. This wasn't about a lack of parking spaces. There were several empty spots in the building's lot where the red car was now parked. This seemed to be about someone who felt entitled to use his private property whenever they wanted. Marcus carefully removed the note from his garage door and took photos of it with his phone. He wanted to document everything in case he needed to file a complaint with building management or even involve the police. The situation was escalating beyond a simple parking dispute, and Marcus realized he was dealing with someone who had no intention of being reasonable or respectful. When Marcus opened his garage and saw his own car sitting there safely, he felt a mix of relief and determination. His vehicle was fine, his garage was intact, and he could get to work on time. But he knew this wasn't over. Someone in his building clearly felt they could intimidate him into giving up his parking rights, and Marcus wasn't about to let that happen. He had worked hard to afford this convenience, and he wasn't going to be bullied out of using what was rightfully his. As Marcus drove to work that morning, his mind was already working on a plan. He had tried being polite and going through official channels, but this person obviously didn't respond to normal courtesy. If they wanted to play games with his property and leave demanding notes, Marcus decided it was time to get creative with his response. He spent his lunch break researching parking laws, tenant rights, and building regulations. If someone wanted to challenge his use of his own garage, he was going to make sure he had all the facts on his side. Marcus spent his entire lunch break at work researching everything he could about parking rights, tenant laws, and building regulations. He discovered that his lease agreement was very clear about his exclusive right to use the garage space, and that blocking someone's private parking area could be considered harassment under local housing laws. Armed with this information, he felt more confident about standing up for himself, but he also realized he needed to be smart about his approach. That evening, Marcus had a chance encounter that changed everything. As he was walking up the stairs to his apartment, he heard raised voices coming from the second floor. He recognized Mrs. Chen's voice, and she sounded upset. Marcus paused on the landing and could hear her talking to someone about parking problems and inconsiderate neighbors. His curiosity got the better of him, and he knocked gently on Mrs. Chen's door to see if everything was okay. Mrs. Chen opened the door with a frustrated expression that immediately softened when she saw Marcus. "Oh, hello, dear," she said. "I'm sorry you had to hear that. I was just having a discussion with our new neighbor about building rules and common courtesy." Behind Mrs. Chen, Marcus could see a woman with dark hair and an annoyed expression. The woman looked to be in her 30s, wearing expensive clothes, and she was clearly not happy about being confronted. "Is this about the parking situation?" Marcus asked politely. Mrs. Chen nodded and gestured for him to come in. "Marcus, I'd like you to meet Jennifer. She just moved into apartment 2C last week. Jennifer, this is Marcus from 3B. I believe you two need to have a conversation about the garage parking." Jennifer looked Marcus up and down with an expression that was anything but friendly. "So you're the one who left that demanding note on my car," she said, crossing her arms. "I don't appreciate being told where I can and can't park. This is a free country, and I can park wherever there's a legal space." Marcus felt his temper rising, but he kept his voice calm and even. "Actually, you were parked directly in front of my private garage, blocking my car inside. That's not a legal parking space. That's my property that I pay extra rent for every month." He pulled out his phone and showed Jennifer the photos he had taken of his lease agreement and the building's parking regulations. Jennifer barely glanced at the documents before waving them away dismissively. "Look, I don't care what your little papers say. I needed somewhere to park while I was moving my things, and that spot was convenient. You should have just found another way to get your car out instead of making such a big deal about it." Mrs. Chen gasped audibly at Jennifer's response. "Young lady, that's not how things work in this building. We all follow the rules and respect each other's property. Marcus pays good money for that garage space, and you had absolutely no right to block it. Besides," Marcus added, trying to keep the conversation productive, "there were several empty parking spaces in the building's regular lot. You didn't need to block my garage entrance, and when I left a polite note asking you to move, you threw it on the ground and left me that rude message demanding I find another solution." Jennifer's face turned red, and her voice got louder. "I don't have time to worry about everyone else's problems. I'm dealing with a major life change here, moving into a new apartment, starting a new job, and learning my way around this neighborhood. The last thing I need is some uptight neighbor lecturing me about parking rules." Marcus realized that Jennifer wasn't just being inconsiderate. She genuinely seemed to believe that her personal circumstances gave her the right to ignore other people's property rights. This wasn't going to be resolved through a simple conversation about building rules. Jennifer clearly felt that her needs were more important than anyone else's, and she wasn't interested in finding a compromise. Mrs. Chen, who had been listening to this exchange with growing disbelief, finally spoke up again. "Jennifer, I've lived in this building for 8 years, and we've never had problems like this before. Everyone here manages to follow the parking rules, even when they're dealing with difficult situations. Your personal challenges don't give you the right to make life harder for your neighbors." "Whatever," Jennifer replied, heading toward the door. "I'll park wherever I want, whenever I want. If you don't like it, call the police or something, but stop bothering me about it." She stormed out of Mrs. Chen's apartment and slammed the door to her own unit so hard that the walls shook. Marcus and Mrs. Chen stood there for a moment in stunned silence. Finally, Mrs. Chen shook her head sadly. "I'm so sorry you have to deal with this, Marcus. I've never met anyone so selfish and rude. She's been causing problems all week, playing loud music, leaving trash in the hallways, and now this parking nonsense." Marcus thanked Mrs. Chen for trying to help mediate the situation, but he could see that reasoning with Jennifer was going to be impossible. She had made it clear that she felt entitled to use his parking space whenever she wanted, and she had no intention of respecting his property rights or following building rules. As Marcus walked back to his apartment, he realized he needed to come up with a different strategy. That night, Marcus called his friend David, who worked as a security consultant for office buildings around the city. David listened to the whole story and then started laughing. "Man, you've got yourself a real piece of work there. But don't worry, I've dealt with people like this before. Sometimes you have to get creative to make your point. Let me tell you about a few perfectly legal ways to protect your property, and maybe teach your neighbor some respect at the same time." David's suggestions gave Marcus exactly the inspiration he needed. His friend had dealt with similar situations in office buildings where people tried to park in spots that didn't belong to them. "The key," David explained, "is to make it more inconvenient for her to park illegally than it would be for her to just follow the rules. And make sure everything you do is completely legal and documented." Marcus spent the weekend preparing his strategy. First, he visited the local hardware store and purchased a high-quality security camera that could record video and send alerts to his phone. He installed it discreetly near his garage entrance, making sure it had a clear view of the entire area. The camera was positioned on his own property, so he had every right to monitor his parking space. He also bought motion-activated lights and a small weather-resistant sign that read, "Private Property, 24-hour video surveillance." Next, Marcus researched the building's policies about guest parking and found something interesting. According to the lease agreements, residents were only allowed to have guests park in the building lot for a maximum of 48 hours without registering with management. Since Jennifer lived in the building, this rule didn't directly apply to her. But Marcus noticed that she had been having frequent visitors who were also parking carelessly around the building. On Monday morning, Marcus implemented phase 1 of his plan. When he left for work, he positioned 2 bright orange traffic cones on either side of his garage entrance. The cones were placed on his own property, clearly marking the boundaries of his parking area. He attached small laminated signs to each cone that read, "Private garage entrance do not block," along with the relevant section numbers from the building's parking regulations. The traffic cones were perfectly legal since they were on Marcus's property, and they made it visually obvious to anyone that this was not a public parking space. Marcus hoped that the clear visual markers would prevent any accidental blocking of his garage, and if Jennifer chose to move the cones and park there anyway, it would prove that her actions were completely intentional. Marcus's new security camera sent him an alert at 2:30 that afternoon. He checked the video feed from his office and couldn't help but smile. Jennifer had just pulled up in her red sedan and was staring at the traffic cones with obvious frustration. The video showed her getting out of her car, walking around the cones and reading the signs. She stood there for several minutes, clearly debating whether to move the cones and park anyway. Finally, Jennifer got back in her car and drove to the building's parking lot, where she found an empty space without any problem. Marcus felt a sense of satisfaction. His simple solution was working exactly as planned. The visual markers had forced Jennifer to acknowledge that she was deliberately choosing to ignore his property rights, and apparently that was enough to make her reconsider her actions. But Marcus's victory was short-lived. At 6 p.m. that evening, his phone buzzed with another alert from the security camera. This time, the video showed Jennifer walking over to his garage entrance with a determined expression. She picked up both traffic cones, carried them across the parking area, and dumped them in the building's dumpster. Then she went back to get her car and parked it directly in front of his garage door, just like she had done before. Marcus watched the video footage with a mixture of anger and amazement. Jennifer had just provided him with perfect evidence that she was deliberately and maliciously interfering with his property. She couldn't claim this was an accident or misunderstanding anymore. The camera had recorded her intentionally removing his legal property markers and then blocking his garage. When Marcus got home that evening, He found Jennifer's car parked in front of his garage once again. But this time, he also found something else. Jennifer had left another note. This one, taped to his garage door with several pieces of duct tape. The note read, "Stop playing games with your stupid cones and signs. I'll park wherever I want. If you keep harassing me, I'll file a complaint with management about you." Marcus carefully documented everything with photos and saved the video footage from his security camera. He now had clear evidence of Jennifer stealing his property, the traffic cones, vandalizing his garage door with the duct tape, and threatening to file false complaints against him. This was no longer just a parking dispute. Jennifer had escalated the situation into harassment and property destruction. That evening, Marcus called the building management company and requested an emergency meeting. Mr. Rodriguez agreed to meet with him first thing the next morning after reviewing the video evidence Marcus had collected. Marcus also called the non-emergency police line to ask about filing a report for theft and harassment. The officer he spoke with was sympathetic and advised him to document everything carefully and consider getting a restraining order if the behavior continued. Before going to bed, Marcus decided to implement phase 2 of his plan. His friend David had suggested that sometimes the best defense is a good offense. If Jennifer wanted to play games with his property, Marcus was prepared to show her that two could play that game. He spent an hour researching Jennifer's daily routine based on his observations and the security camera footage, and he began formulating a response that would be completely legal but extremely inconvenient for his inconsiderate neighbor. Marcus also did something else that night. He printed out copies of all his documentation, including his lease agreement, the building's parking policies, photos of the vandalism, and the threatening note Jennifer had left. He organized everything into a neat folder, preparing for his meeting with building management. If Jennifer wanted to escalate this conflict, Marcus was ready to show everyone exactly who was violating building rules and harassing their neighbors. The meeting with Mr. Rodriguez the next morning went better than Marcus had expected. The building manager reviewed all of Marcus's documentation with growing concern, especially the video footage showing Jennifer deliberately removing the traffic cones and the threatening notes she had left. "This is completely unacceptable behavior," Mr. Rodriguez said, shaking his head. "We've never had a resident show such blatant disregard for building rules and other tenants' rights." Mr. Rodriguez immediately issued Jennifer a formal written warning about her parking violations and harassment of other residents. The warning stated that any future incidents would result in eviction proceedings. He also informed her that she was liable for replacing the stolen traffic cones and would be charged for any damage to Marcus's garage door from the duct tape. But Marcus knew from his brief interaction with Jennifer that a formal warning wasn't going to change her behavior. Sure enough, that very afternoon his security camera sent him another alert. Jennifer had parked her red sedan in front of his garage again, but this time she had done something that made Marcus's blood boil. She had covered his security camera with black spray paint, completely blocking its view of the parking area. This was the final straw for Marcus. Vandalizing his security equipment was a serious crime, and now Jennifer had crossed the line from being a rude neighbor into being a criminal. Marcus immediately called the police and filed a report for destruction of property and ongoing harassment. The responding officer took photos of the damaged camera and advised Marcus to install additional security measures if possible. That evening, Marcus implemented the most creative part of his plan. He had noticed that Jennifer typically came home from work around 5:30 p.m. and liked to park in front of his garage because it was the closest spot to the building entrance. Marcus realized that if he could legally occupy that space during the times Jennifer wanted to use it, he could force her to park in the regular parking lot like everyone else. Marcus enlisted the help of his friend David, who owned a small moving truck for his security consulting business. David agreed to park the truck legally in the general parking area, positioned in such a way that it blocked Jennifer's usual path to Marcus's garage entrance. The truck wasn't blocking any specific parking spaces, but it made it impossible for Jennifer to easily access the area in front of Marcus's garage door. The next morning, Marcus also purchased a bright yellow wheel stop, the kind used in parking lots to prevent cars from pulling too far forward. He installed it directly in front of his garage door on his own property. The wheel stop was perfectly legal since it was on his property, and it made it physically impossible for anyone to park close enough to block his garage door. Marcus's multi-layered approach worked brilliantly. When Jennifer came home that evening, she found David's truck blocking her usual route, and the new wheel stop preventing her from parking in front of the garage entrance, even if she managed to get around the truck. The security camera that Marcus had replaced, this one hidden more carefully, captured Jennifer's frustration as she circled the parking area several times, looking for a way to reach her preferred illegal parking spot. Finally, Jennifer gave up and parked in the building's regular parking lot, just like every other resident. But she wasn't finished causing problems. Within an hour of arriving home, she was knocking loudly on Marcus's apartment door. When he opened it, Jennifer was practically shouting with anger. "I know you're behind all this," she yelled, pointing toward the parking area. "That truck, that stupid yellow thing, all of it. You're trying to make my life difficult because you're mad about the parking thing. This is harassment, and I'm going to report you to the building management and the police!" Marcus remained completely calm, which seemed to infuriate Jennifer even more. "I'm not sure what you're talking about," he replied politely. "My friend David parks his work truck in the building lot sometimes when he visits me. As for the wheel stop, that's installed on my own property to protect my garage door from damage. Everything I've done is completely legal and within my rights as a tenant." Jennifer's face turned bright red, and she started screaming about calling lawyers and having Marcus evicted. Several neighbors opened their doors to see what the commotion was about, including Mrs. Chen, who had been documenting Jennifer's disruptive behavior since she moved in. Marcus simply listened to Jennifer's threats with a calm expression, knowing that her public outburst was only making her look worse to everyone in the building. "If you have concerns about anything I'm doing," Marcus said when Jennifer finally paused to take a breath, "I encourage you to speak with Mr. Rodriguez. He's aware of the entire situation and can explain building policies to you. I'm just exercising my legal rights to use and protect my own property." Jennifer stormed off, slamming her apartment door so hard that it echoed through the entire building. Mrs. Chen approached Marcus with a concerned expression. "That young woman is completely out of control," she said. "I've been keeping notes about all the disruptions she's caused, and I think several of us neighbors should write letters to management about her behavior." Marcus thanked Mrs. Chen for her support, but he had a feeling that the situation was about to resolve itself in a way that none of them expected. Jennifer's behavior was escalating rapidly, and people who act as irrationally as she had been rarely know when to stop. Marcus suspected that Jennifer was about to make a mistake that would solve his parking problem permanently. Marcus's prediction about Jennifer making a critical mistake proved accurate, but even he was surprised by how quickly and dramatically everything unfolded. 3 days after their confrontation in the hallway, Marcus received an urgent call from Mr. Rodriguez at 7 a.m. "Marcus, you need to get down to the parking area right away. There's been an incident with your neighbor and we need you to review your security footage." When Marcus arrived at the parking area, he found quite a scene. Jennifer's red sedan was parked at an odd angle across 2 regular parking spaces, and there were obvious scrape marks along the side of the building wall. Mr. Rodriguez was there, with 2 police officers, and they were all examining something near Marcus's garage entrance. As Marcus got closer, he could see that someone had taken a key or sharp object and scratched deep gouges into his garage door, spelling out profanity and threats. "We believe Ms. Jennifer was responsible for vandalizing your garage door sometime during the night," Officer Martinez explained to Marcus. "Building management called us this morning when they discovered the damage. We understand you have security cameras that might have recorded the incident." Marcus retrieved the footage from his hidden security camera, and what it showed was even worse than anyone had expected. The video clearly captured Jennifer at 2 a.m., using her car keys to scratch the offensive words into Marcus's garage door. But that wasn't the most damaging part of the recording. The camera had also captured Jennifer attempting to break into Marcus's garage by trying to pry open the door with a crowbar she had brought from her apartment. The attempted break-in was a felony, and the property destruction was significant, enough to constitute vandalism charges. Officer Martinez reviewed the footage carefully and then placed Jennifer under arrest when she came downstairs to see what the commotion was about. Marcus watched as his troublesome neighbor was handcuffed and led away, still shouting about how unfair everyone was being to her. But the story didn't end there. During the investigation, police discovered that Jennifer had been living in the apartment illegally. It turned out that she had never actually signed a lease with the building management company. She had been subletting from the previous tenant, who had moved out without informing the building. When Mr. Rodriguez checked his records, he found that rent hadn't been paid on apartment 2C for 2 months. Mrs. Chen, who had been documenting all of Jennifer's disruptive behaviors, provided police with a detailed log of noise complaints, harassment incidents, and property damage that Jennifer had caused throughout the building. Several other neighbors came forward with their own stories of threatening behavior and intimidation tactics that Jennifer had used when anyone complained about her conduct. The investigation revealed that Jennifer had been evicted from her previous apartment building for similar behavior and had been moving from place to place, causing problems wherever she went. She had a pattern of bullying neighbors, ignoring property rules, and then becoming hostile when anyone challenged her behavior. Marcus realized that his parking garage had just been the latest target in Jennifer's ongoing war against anyone who tried to set boundaries with her. Marcus's legal troubles ended as quickly as they had begun. Jennifer was charged with attempted burglary, criminal vandalism, harassment, and trespassing. She was also served with an immediate eviction notice from the building, even though she had never been an official tenant. The combination of criminal charges and housing violations meant that Jennifer would be moving out, whether she wanted to or not. The building management company paid for all repairs to Marcus's garage door and security camera, and they also upgraded the building's security system to prevent future incidents. Mr. Rodriguez personally apologized to Marcus for the stress and inconvenience, and he implemented new policies requiring all residents and subletters to go through proper background checks and lease procedures. Within 2 weeks, Jennifer was gone from the building entirely. Her red sedan disappeared from the parking lot, and apartment 2C remained empty while management searched for a qualified tenant who would actually follow building rules. Marcus finally had his peaceful parking arrangement back, and he could once again enjoy the simple pleasure of pulling into his own garage without drama or confrontation. The experience taught Marcus several valuable lessons about standing up for himself and protecting his rights. He learned that some people will only respond to firm boundaries backed up by documentation and legal consequences. His methodical approach to gathering evidence and working through proper channels had ultimately protected him and resolved the situation permanently. Marcus kept his security camera system and continued to document everything related to his parking space, but he never had another problem. The new tenant, who eventually moved into apartment 2C, was a quiet graduate student who actually thanked Marcus for keeping the building peaceful and secure. Mrs. Chen often commented on how much better the building atmosphere had become once Jennifer was gone. Looking back on the whole experience, Marcus realized that his perfect response to Jennifer's parking aggression hadn't been any single clever trick or confrontation. Instead, it had been his patient, systematic approach to documenting everything, staying within legal boundaries, and refusing to let someone else's bad behavior change his own principles. By responding to Jennifer's escalating harassment with calm professionalism and proper legal channels, Marcus had allowed her to defeat herself through her own poor choices and criminal behavior. The garage space that had once been a source of stress and conflict became Marcus's sanctuary once again, and he never took that peace and security for granted.